Built the plant in 53, Pike and Portsmouth DOE. U-235 in the groundwater chain, heavy metals drift with rain. They cracked the pipes, they dropped the shell, still denied what tests could tell. Open air, no tent in place, children sick, no public trace. Atomic corruption, filed it safe, never discussed. Paper trail burned to dust, you won't find what you won't trust. Atomic corruption, carried down the river bend, across the state, you can't pretend this don't poison in the end. Kids with cancer, no cause named, dust in schools they never claimed. No swab, no test, no agency, just buried deep bureaucracy. They said too costly to contain, but built a dirt dump across the drain. Green up CO2, same
call into these
live the fish
shows.
Are gone, blame climate change. Atomic corruption, stripped and sealed, they walked away.
It's called atomic corruption. Atomic corruption. I'll put the link to the site here in a second, actually. It's over 300 songs, anti-nuclear songs, which is more than the entire collection created by musicians worldwide. It's in your description. I hope you're doing well. Hello, everybody. Hi, Dana. Thank you. Dana's got the number in there for you, too. Corruption. Let's get after it here. The name of that song is Atomic Corruption. Nuclear Exceptionalism is another great song. The Enrichment Man is another one. Meltdown Queen is a great song. Calm Down Charlie is actually quite impressive. Nuclear Belgium is another one of my favorites. So many. Cleaning Green, another one. Radioactive Cream Box, 3 words. Official video. These are important, based upon real stuff. Yep. Hi, Dan. Hi, everybody. Here we go. Rock and roll. So hard to listen to yourself. It's okay to listen to somebody else. Headphones are perfect. I can hear my own squeaky voice. Intense Israeli strikes hit Tehran after Trump demands unconditional surrender. You want surrender? Oh yeah. Isn't that reminiscent of Hitler? You want surrender? Unconditional surrender. What the fuck? Who talks like that? Off to a bad start. Swearing already. That's nuclear for you. So tonight's show is about liars. We're just going to expose their lies. We'll show you some documentation. Yeah, James can't see Don. How crazy is that? Right, they're the two comments right alongside of each other, but James can't see his. I don't know if Don can see James. Don, can you see James's comment? I think he can. We'll check here in a second. Hello, everyone. Blah, 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 blah. Brutal censorship again tonight. Intense Israeli strikes target the capital. of Tehran. What's going to happen? I wonder, are they going to have a... Yeah, James can't see you, Don. That's right. So weird, eh? To see those comments there where they can't see each other. Way to go, Google. Leave us alone, you big bully. There's only a little handful of us, sure. Who's winning the war over there? I wonder if that's what you want to call it. Trump's going to go in there? What's he going to do? Apparently Trump is threatening the religious leader of the country. Because he can, right? Such a strange behavior. Unconditional surrender, or... The big problem, as I see it, is there was an oil tanker down in Omar just caught fire, burning pretty impressively. Iran can stop the oil. It can wreck the oil fields. It can do some. It can take out all the shipping. There's nothing they can do about it. They can knock some of the missiles out of the skies. They can't knock them all out. And they're using the old missiles, not even using new missiles yet, and new drones. They're using 2-decade-old or more drones. Unless they're going to nuke Iran, Iran is going to put up a fight like they've never encountered before. And that could mean, we're talking about gas prices at the pumps, for instance, which reflects to commodities, because commodity use gas and diesel to get it to your communities, right? And you're talking about triple at least $300 barrel of oil. It's going to break almost every business out there. There's no plans to kill him. The Khomeini just said there was no plans to kill him, but now they know where he's to. That's a threat. TerraPower lands $650 million from NVIDIA's investment fund, Bill Gates and others. It's $2.5 billion, I think they're at now. Still no application into the regulatory agency. They got a lot of good excuses, though. I can't read that. I got to bring up this screen. It's not like this is TV, where TV is typically 99.9% of the people watching it, like the mainstream idiot machine. 99% of the people watching it on a big screen, right? So, but in my case, you got tablatures, you got cell phones, you got small screens, etc., all the way up through the projectors. You got the whole 8 different selections, basically. So the new investors are N Ventures, the venture capital arm of the leading computer chip maker NVIDIA. But they're corporate personnel, so they're not paying taxes. They're putting their money in offshore accounts. A lot of money to play around with. And buddying up to the nuclear industry is definitely good for business, from what I'm seeing. HD Hyundai, that builds ships, and they want to exploit so-called small modular reactors. TerraPower nuclear reactor technology offers innovative carbon-free solutions. It doesn't offer anything. They don't even have an application into the regulatory agency. They've never built a reactor. How can you offer something? The company previously raised about $1 billion, but they got $2 billion from the United States government. So that's $3 billion. They just got $650 million or something. Yeah, 650. So that's $3.65 billion. The government gave them, they still can't build nothing. They raised $1 billion with no product. They just got another $650 million. They got no product. They were awarded $2 billion for the United States Department of Energy. They still haven't got a product. And they're supposed to be cheaper and faster. The real makings of a superhero. We're not seeing it. That's the same with every one of these companies. We're getting around to it. 23 days, 24 days, we'll be up and running. No, you'll be selling off all your assets at auction, and they'll be gobbled up by venture capitalists who will manipulate the stock market for a year or two before they go bankrupt. Amazon, Google, and other corporate after looting millions of people out of their retirement packages. Amazon, Google, and other corporations signs a pledge, which is really interesting, isn't it? Amazon, Google, Microsoft is the other corporation. They want to make it sound like there's a big string of them. There's not. To work towards tripling global nuclear power output by 2050. That usually starts by building reactors, not talking about it, not ripping off everybody on the stock market, artificially inflating stocks that for corporations that don't have a product. You're talking about, and we've done the math on it, I'm not even going to try. You got to start cracking out reactors, let's put it this way, all over the place. And if you're going to use small modular reactors, you're talking over 1,000 to split the difference for large reactors. Microsoft has a deal to restart a nuclear reactor at 3 Mile Island. Why would you do that? Why would you do something like that? Well, the main reason is it's a nuclear site. It's got all the licenses in place. It's on the Susquehanna River. And and it had a significant meltdown, nuclear meltdown. But it's cheap, right? Because these reactors, I really don't understand it, right? Why it was so important to do it right there, The community that's right alongside of is completely dependent on taxes to fund their town council, their snow clearing, and everything else. So when they closed the site down, that community, people just started bailing out, leaving their houses behind. And this is one of the scams. NuScale, an Oregon company, there's another scam, that's also developing small modular reactors. Well, they're not developing small modular reactors. They are buying patents from companies that are gone bankrupt. That's about it. So it's in one sense, right? You're going to make a few dollars on your investment. You're not. You can make a lot more money anywhere else, but don't worry because you support nuclear. So stupid to support these companies when they're not even trying to build a product. Supreme Court clears the way for temporary nuclear waste storage in Texas. It's like they got a little part here and a little part over there and another part of a company over here and another part of a company over there. Whop that together at some point and make a reactor out of it. If somebody can come up with a design that works after 90 years, I wouldn't hold my breath. Supreme Court clears the way for temporary nuclear waste storage in Texas and New Mexico. So, some of these stories drive me crazy too. It's not just you. And I don't blame people if they can't, if they can't keep up with what I'm doing. I burn the candles at both ends to do the things I'm doing all the time, right? And it's always the last candle in the box each day. The idea in my little tiny brain is because the shows are live and because they're regular, it's impossible to ignore me. And I don't need 1,000 people on my show or 10,000 people on my show or 100,000 or 1 million subscribers. I don't need it. I need the small handful of policymakers and investors to watch my shows, whether somebody downloads it and gives it to them or they download it or friends, some of their business partners. They can't ignore the show because there has never been a show before. Still no show besides mine. But I run an educational program and I'm also doing field studies whenever I can. And that's the biggest pain in the ass you can be. That's the biggest. That's like having a hand up the earth all the time. Metaphorically, right? You're definitely, because they tell one version of nuclear, and we cover that all the time, which is the false version to the policymakers and the investors, and that's always been that way. And so the policymakers, investors have always been able to plead plausible deniability. because they don't know nothing. They've just been fed it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine and climbing a mountain, sleeping next to someone, flying on an airplane, or 15 minutes in a canoe. This got nothing to do with radioactive fallout. But that's they've been fed that for 80 plus years. That has been the ceremony for everybody that gets involved in this industry, right? They have to go through this. You have to learn not to talk about the things I talk about and only talk about the stuff that we rally against, right? But times have changed. We live in an information age, and they're addicted to information for everything else. And so a lot of them will say, don't watch Durnford. Of course, they're going to end up watching you at some point now, right? And it's impossible because we're prolific. We produce a lot of hours every week, month, and year, right, for many, many years. So we're prolific, I think, is the right way to put it, because we cover so much material. And if you know all the propaganda, and you're part of the industry, and you finally come and watch one of my videos, I just fucked you up. The same thing as kicking you in the nuts and poking you in the eye. I fucked you up. You're going to walk away limping and hanging on to your gonads because your conscience just took a fucking beating. And that's the reality of this. And why we might never get no recognition for the work that we do. And because the censorship, it's more than likely true. Still don't mean that we're not effective. And that we're not 100% right 100% of the times. Because I go through a lot of painstaking trouble not to talk about things I don't know anything about, and provide the documentation for as much as I can stomach in a 2-hour period, which quite often is a lot. And so we are not to be denied after all this experience and all this research, and we're not wrong. You know, get all the emaciated gray whales, all of them in the migratory route are emaciated. And they were emaciated when they were going south, now they're emaciated while they're heading north. Do you got any idea how insane that statement actually is? All the migratory, it means all the other whales are emaciated too. You can't just have one species. It's just heartbreaking. Back to the story. This is the story we wrote to bang our heads into. Supreme Court clears the way for temporary nuclear waste storage in Texas and New Mexico. The license would allow the companies to operate the facilities for 40 years with the possibility of a 40-year renewal. It's insane, eh? I thought you were only storing it for a decade or two. No. It could be there for 80 years. We're not trying to come up with a solution. Everything they're putting there is splitting atoms into the environment. So it's an invisible snowstorm. And the amount that they're putting there is, holy shit, watch this. So they want to put 5,500 tons of fuel itself. 5,500 tons. We'll get to that in a minute. The court ruling is not a final ruling in favor of the licensees, but the removal is a major roadblock. They've got to sweep it under the rug so they can attack you with thousands, a small modular reactor every 5 miles. Right? They wanted 1,000 small modular reactors on the highway for all electric trucks and vehicles. Well, that would mean you're going to have a small modular reactor fuel station every 5 miles. It's insane. 90,000 metric tons of spent fuel is roughly 100,000 tons, 90,000 metric tons of fuel. Spent fuel, which is 98% active, which dates back to the 80s, is accumulating at a current and former nuclear plant sites nationwide. Increasing by more than 2,000 tons, 1,800 metric tons each year, which is 4 million pounds a year. So a pound of this stuff in a stadium, everybody's going to be dead in about 20 minutes. So you can exterminate the whole planet if you distribute this out pound by pound by pound to places where people gather up, right? This is 4 million. Think about each pound is splitting enough atoms to kill everybody in New York City if they were to breathe it in. It gets sucked up into trees and plants and flowers and leaves, and it gets sucked up like carbon gets sucked up, actually, the radiation fallout, and it bioaccumulates now for 90 plus years. It's pulsing energy every second almost at the speed of light. So it's not inert or something. On top of that, it's wicked to everything with replicating cells. It attacks everything with replicating cells. And each year we're creating a whole lot more. So there's more splitting atoms. And every day the amount we're talking about is an invisible snowstorm covering the planet of anthropogenic man-made radiation. Atoms. And then we're adding another 4 million in North America each year. Pounds. Increased by more than 2,000 tons, 18. And they have temporary storage sites are necessary because existing plants are reaching capacity. The fuel pools are stuffed. This stuff is splitting atoms directly into your environment. This is the go, no-go, pass humanity. This will wipe out all the species, the fuel pools on their own, the releases. It takes quite a few decades for that to manifest, but that's the ultimate outcome. It'll wipe out all species, all humans. Just the emissions from the fuel pools. Why won't you wake up? Why are you not fighting back? This is not fucking very difficult to understand. They're not building all the nuclear fuel pools and nuclear plants and reprocessing sites and dumps alongside of farms for something to do. They're exterminating you. And by proxy, the fuel that is all splitting atoms from 1,000 sites worldwide plus, not counting what they dumped, will exterminate us at some point, just the emissions. Nothing on the planet has an autoimmune trigger to defend against this stuff. Why are we letting them do that? Why do they hate us so much is another question I can't answer. I don't know the answer to these questions. I don't think they know the answer. I think they're just running on autopilot as soon as they get their degree from a university. They're like, how evil can I be? That's how you advance in the nuclear industry. So the kid comes out of college with get a job, and now is, how evil can I be? The current generation that just came out of university in the United Kingdom, for instance, when 96% of the nuclear waste was to be stored, now they're recycling it, 96%. 97%, only 3% now will be stored forever. They're recycling the rest of it. Whether it's in the forks and knives and baby toys and cars, who knows, but they're recycling it. Because there's no checks and balances. For 75 years, they've been putting it in a place where they're planning on storing it for 1 million years. This current generation comes into university and they're just completely out of control. The presence of some spent fuel also complicates plans to decommission some plants. The spent fuel is not spent, it's active for millions of years. And what I mean by that is it's splitting atoms. So a reactor core is boiling water for 1 million homes and businesses. And it's doing that by splitting atoms. And so that's quite the interesting trick, right? Because the pulsing energy at almost at the speed of light, it creates all this heat because there's so much of it. Like, there's so much of it. If you could see it, it'll blow your mind. Once you take it out of the container, the reactor, after 14 months or something, and put it in a fuel pool, where it's going to sit for decades, because it's really hot, because it's splitting atoms, it's boiling off about 120,000 liters out of each pool. It's just like the worst Imagine if you took the tallest building in every city, 1,000 cities, and at the top of the building, there was this purple vapor coming out. And you knew, because for many years, anybody got caught in that purple plume died. Then you would appreciate what I'm talking about, right? If you know, oh, I can't run over there. The purple plume's over there. The wind's blowing that way today. We got to stay away. Everybody's locked up in their basement until the wind changes over there, because that plume will kill you. You would get it right quick. But that's what's going on. You can't see it or smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it or perceive it. But if it was purple, there would be nobody within 1,000 miles of a nuclear power plant. Nobody. You desperately have to wake up. And the industry needs to come on over to our side. We're the winning side. The presence of the spent fuel also complicates plans. There's an understatement. For a permanent underground storage facility at Yucca Mountain in northwest of Las Vegas was stalled because of staunch opposition from most Nevada residents and officials. It's true in one way. There's three reasons why they never done Yucca Mountain. First off, there was $20 billion worth of litigation. So that'll go on forever. Once you're distributing that much money out there, they have an incentive to keep that argument alive forever. There's a lot of money to be sucked in, right? The next reason was because it's on an old fault line, dormant fault line. But as we know, the Noto Peninsula in 2024, January 1st, ruptured after 3,500 years, and the damage was epic. But they did have earthquakes alongside of Yucca Mountain. They weren't heavy, but they were enough to say, well, that's the end of that idea. And the third compromise was how much heat could it hold? So, excuse a little dry. How much heat can Yucca Mountain contain for 200 years? That's the equation. Because the fuel is always producing heat. And if you lock it in a mountain, the mountain is going to heat up. That's the equation. And so how much heat can they contain for 200 years? I don't know why 200 years. Maybe there's a meteorite coming in 199 and then it won't matter. Maybe they know that stuff. I don't know. But it was 200 years was the equation. And one of the kooky ideas just before it got closed down was they were going to fill the mountain up with air conditioners so they can put a lot more fuel in the mountain. This is madness. But that was their last plan they had to keep that idea alive. And then the earthquake studies showed up, and that kind of sealed the deal for that mountain. Okay, so the Nuclear Regulatory Commission granted the Texas licensed interim storage partner, which is Holtec, I believe, based in Andrews, Texas, Chris Singh, right, Holtec, facilities that could take up to 5,500 metric tons, so 11 million pounds, I think it is. I've done the math here, maybe. I've done the math for this one. So 5,000 metric tons was 11 million pounds. And 231 million tons of other radioactive waste. I thought it could all fit into a swimming pool. 231 million tons. So that would be equal. Let me see. Let me do the math on this. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7. That would be equal to 35 rows of 1-ton trucks with 1 ton of this stuff in the back of it. 35 rows of 1-ton trucks wrapped around the entire planet continuously. So there'd be a road traffic 30 miles, 31 trucks wide, 1-ton trucks wide, with 1 ton in the back of each of it. This is absurd amount we're talking about. But don't worry, because that'll all fit in a swimming pool, right? Michael Schellenberg. That's actually equal to 462 billion pounds. So when they're talking about storage, they're not talking about storage like a little building. They're talking about, holy shit, the storage we've never seen before. 230, where the hell did that come from? 231 million tons? They dumped 450 billion gallons in the soil at Hanford during the Manhattan Project in 41 miles of unlined trenches right on the Columbia River, downhill to the Columbia River. That's equal to an aquarium 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the planet more than once. And then you got this pile. So now you got a wall that's 1,000 feet high wrapped around the planet. Nuclear waste. Let's just imagine what China and Pakistan and Israel and everybody else got done. It's clean and green, call it. You're right. I'm sorry. 462 million or billion pounds. Calling this industry an asshole is appropriate. I think, isn't it? The Non-Regulatory Commission gave a license for the site to Holtec International, of all people. Chris Singh, one of the worst people you'll ever meet in the nuclear industry. He acts like a goblin. He looks like a goblin. He's the janitor and the president, by the way, of Holtec. We're all crazy. The Washington Post, big red banner. Only one American can start a nuclear war, and that's the president. An American president has the sole authority to order a nuclear strike, even if every advisor in the room is against it. If there's 100 people in the room, 99 of them says no, Trump says yes, or whoever's the president, then light her up. And they got to do it. You can't disobey the military, right? Democracy dies in the darkness. The Washington Post, who told so many lies about the nuclear industry, can barely wrap my mind around it. I could do an entire volume, encyclopedia on lies the nuclear industry spun through the Washington Post. So wherever the president goes, the president has a biscuit in his, what they call a biscuit, in his pocket. He doesn't leave home without it. Well, apparently Bill Clinton did once. And the biscuit has the verification that he's the president. That gives him access to what's in those so-called football, right? Which is the ability and the authority to be able to light up a country from anywhere on the planet. Mackenzie Knight-Boyle is a senior research associate for the Nuclear Information Project, the Federation of American Scientists. That sounds so important, don't it? But if we were talking about Fukushima, her job would cut your throat. And she would do a good job of it. 3 minutes of football and a biscuit. These are all a president of the United States needs to start a nuclear war. Well, it needs more than that. It needs an enemy. During a 74 meeting with lawmakers, Nixon, one of the worst humans imaginable, stated, "I can go in my office, pick up the telephone, and in 25 minutes, 70 million people will be dead." And he was correct. He's the only person in the country can legally order the use of nuclear weapons. A power referred to as the sole authority. And nuclear use should not depend on the whims of one person. You know, the problem with democracy is 51% can launch a nuclear weapon. President's sole authority was established beginning the nuclear age during the Truman administration. Harry Truman desired to keep nuclear weapons out of the hands of the overzealous, trigger-happy generals, some dashing lieutenant colonel. And there's a couple of instances. They wanted to use it in China, and they wanted to use a nuclear weapon in Vietnam and North Korea. The military did. Well, let's get one of those nuclear weapons up there and drop now. See how they feel about that? Instead, they just they were using cooking oil. What they call cooking oil on the population was the napalm. They used to refer to it as cooking oil. The man with the football. There's no way to recall or disarm an ICBM once they have launched. Well, there is. They have lasers. They have anti-missile weapons now. But they have lasers, so there actually is ways to disarm them now. But you can't disarm them from the source. Ooh. Keep it rolling here. The president can legally and logistically simply command the Pentagon to launch. The Pentagon is not going to resist. Even when the warning systems indicate an attack is underway, it might be a false alarm. That's happened on several occasions. As recently as 2018 in Hawaii. Remember Hawaii? On January 13, 2018, just days after Donald Trump and North Korea's supreme leader lobbed nuclear threats at each other, smartphones across Hawaii received an alert from the State Emergency Management System. Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. And you can still see those videos of people just panicking, man, all over Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. Turns out it wasn't a drill. It was somebody accidentally clicked a button. One of the most dangerous publicly known false alarms occurred in 1979. Warning screens at the Pentagon and 3 other command centers suddenly lit up, showing nearly 1,500 Soviet ballistic missiles headed towards the United States. Per proper procedure, fighter jets were put to the sky, nuclear bomber crews were ordered to their planes, nuclear missile crews were put on high alert, and the President's Emergency Airborne Command Post, known as the Doomsday Plane, which just landed apparently in the United States somewhere. 6 minutes after the alert began, officers at the North American Aerospace Defense Command discovered that a training cassette simulating a Soviet attack had mistakenly been entered into the primary computer system and broadcast to other command centers. There was a video about it. There was a movie about that. I got it out there. I can't remember the name of it. I haven't watched it. I'll probably watch it tonight. The United States Uniform Code of Military Justice, the foundation of the U.S. military justice, makes disobeying a legal order from a superior during peacetime punishable by dishonorable discharge, forfeiture of pay, and even a 5-year confinement. So you can't join the military. You're joining a cult. You can't leave it. You can't quit, and you can't disobey an order, which is absurd. There are some checks and balances where you can disobey an order that is. During wartime, disobeying legal orders can be punishable by death, and had been many, many times. Many different countries have killed their soldiers for not just being useful idiots. Trump next week is going to be very big. He's getting a lot of traction today. He said next week is going to be very big after he was asked whether the United States will join the Israeli military action. They're getting the shit kicked out of them. They've never been beat up before in their own country. They never fought a real military before either. They're running out of missiles. They're running out of missiles. They can't keep this up for much longer, I wouldn't imagine. Next week will be decisive regarding Iran, and it may happen before the end of the week. There was allegedly two large military cargo planes from China came in, turned their beacons off before they got into the airspace, landed in Iran and dropped off a lot of material and flew out again. These are huge jumbo jet cargo planes that came in allegedly from China, which wouldn't be a big surprise to see Russia do the same thing. Iran was not trying to build weapons, says UN nuclear watchdog. That was today. Iran attacks Israel for the sixth consecutive day. The Iranian regime is targeting Israeli civilians. There is no civilians in Israel. They're all military. They gave up their right to be a civilian. They're all military. They're all ready to go for active duty, no matter how old they are. It's a 100% militarized society. But that's simple. What they're saying is simply not true. That might be what Israel is doing. No proof of active nuclear weapons program in Iran, says the International Atomic Energy Agency again today. Scumbag IAEA. Washington Examiner. U.S. will build 3 small nuclear reactors by next 4th of July. I got to laugh because I've heard these stuff before. I mean, what are you talking about? You're going to build 3 small modular reactors before next July. You got 13 months. You don't have a license into the regulatory agency. You don't have land. You don't have a supply chain. You definitely don't have the welders. So how are you going to do it? Anybody know any idea about this at all? Well, Trump said they can do it if they want to, so they're going to do it. I'll be watching, but I don't believe him. At least 3 small reactors running and producing power by July of next year. And the reactor will be located inside the Department of Energy's containment facility, as if the Idaho National Laboratory actually had a real containment. That'll be a laugh. And typically, the small modular reactor can generate upwards of 300 megawatts of power. Well, the Canadian small modular reactor 300, because it's 300 megawatts, the boiling water reactor X 300, is a 24-story building. These are skyscrapers. Half of it is going to be underground. Have you ever been 12 stories underground before? None of it makes any sense. These are not small modular reactors. These are massive reactors. They're still 12 stories above the ground. So they'll show you a picture of this really serene landscape and this really fancy looking little 1-story building. It's got nothing to do with it. It's 12-story buildings above and 12-story below the earth. Why not use geothermal? Anything a small modular reactor could do, and geothermal can do it 10 years, 15 years quicker, 20 years quicker. There are no small modular reactors operational in the United States. Right. And the alleged 3 that's around the world got nothing to do with small. They're massive. As of the end of May, the non-regulatory commission has only issued 2 approvals for small modular reactor designs, both for scam artist, stock market schemer, NuScale, would generate less than 100 megawatts. So they have a partial license design into the regulatory agency. So they have maybe 500,000 pieces of paper or something. It's 2 million pieces of paper are supposed to be in. And it takes a long time because you're talking about 400 people with 80,000 pieces of paper each they got to get through. So 3, 4, 5 years. And then you got to do a consensus with 400 engineers to make sure that the whole design, everything is not going to go bananas and drive them off that part of the country for a million years. Sellafield nuclear plant bosses aim to demolish the turbine hall. I'm sure they got more than one. And look at, why is this place surrounded by farms? This is a hideous disease factory. As there's supposed to be 1,000 buildings at that site, right? We've covered this a lot over the last couple of decades, so, and it's surrounded by farms. Rona County backs $25 million grant application for nuclear micro-reactor projects. That's a radium's project. We've heard of them a couple of times. They don't have a design or an application into the regulatory agencies. And $25 million for the controversial radiant microreactor. There's 100 of these small modular reactor companies, right? And so they only show up when there's stories like this. For the controversial radiant microreactor utility infrastructure project, right? And there's a lot of speculation they're not going to build one. $25 million grant is not a direct payment to Radiant, but is earmarked for infrastructures for roads, security, parking lots, and a publicly owned office building. If you took that $25 million and built a geothermal plant, you'll never mention the word small modular reactor again, and you wouldn't waste $25 million. They're earmarked by the legislator to the business council will go somewhere. So why not build a geothermal plant? Are you too stupid down there? Because you can only build stuff that don't exist. And it's going to poison your environment with high assay plutonium mixed oxide fuel. Why would you even put that in your county? For economic diversification, job creation, generalization, benefits for the community. What benefit? Everybody got to get radiation therapy that ends up killing them from the cancer they got from the radiation they were poisoned with. I'll never understand it. Radiation is the majority of cancer worldwide is from the nuclear industry. I mean, every nuclear plant is surrounded by farms. Where do you think all that radioactive fallout from the fuel pool goes every day? It's not just cancer. There's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, Alzheimer's, dementia. There's autism, Down syndrome. The first studies they do is autism and Down syndrome after a nuclear release. Right, they'll do that study for decades. And because they know they're going to find it. But now just ask your hairdresser, are they seeing an increase in Alzheimer's, dementia in their clients? Prepare to get your mind blown. Residents expressed concern about the plan for spent nuclear fuel storage. So they want to store what? How did that show up here? Which involves storing spent fuel from places every 5 years is not lawful under Wyoming's law. So I guess they have to change their fuel every 5 years to plutonium mixed oxide fuel. The emissions from that, like the regular emissions from the fuel pools are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Do you really think surrounding that with farms as far as you can see is a good idea? He referred to the spent fuel as turning harmless radioactive fuel into a death sentence and called it the deadliest of the deadly. That's right. Radium is attempting to change the law. A lot of the residents shared anxiety about the property's value, health risk, and they have a very, 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 very valid point. And the lack of clear plans regarding transportation of radioactive material and evacuation protocols. You have to evacuate right away before you fire it up if you want to avoid the radiation. Just the neutrons can be measured 150 miles away and a mile and a half or a mile deep in granite. You'll still measure the neutrons from a nuclear plant. The antineutrinos, I'm sorry, from a nuclear power plant. That's not cool, man. Trust me. You don't want to live anywhere near this place. You don't want to eat the food from the farms. Evil, just, my goodness. How could we make the nuclear plant more evil? Well, let's put it right in the middle of prime farmland. Okay. You're a genius. You're going places. That guy, that engineer. If you look at all the nuclear plants, the design is surrounded by farms as far as you can see it. If you look at every nuclear plant out there, 99% are surrounded by farms as far as you can see. You really think that's an accident? You really think that's a coincidence? Come on, you can't be that naive. They're murdering you in your supermarkets, and you refuse to accept that. Not my fault. I'm trying to help you. They're trying to kill you. And they're good at it. It takes a long time to manifest, usually, but not all the time, depending on how much releases they have. The more fuel they got, the more poison the food is from the farms, right? The more spent fuel they got stored on site, the more releases every day. And they're producing it more and more every year going to the fuel pools. Every year, the food from the farms is even more deadly. No, it can't happen to you. You're invisible. Radiation can never hurt you. I know. I hear you. I believe you. I'm sure you're 100% right. What if you're not? Don't make those decisions for your family, though. Get your family out of there. If you want to stay there and eat the food, you stay there and eat the food, but don't do that to your loved ones. He also suggested that even if the Radiant project does not fully materialize, a pretty good chance of that, the developed infrastructure could benefit future industries for small modular reactors. That's what it's all about. We've covered these guys before. The blind leading the blind leading the blind on the cliff's edge. That's what they're doing right there. What happens when a nuclear site is struck, and can Israel-Iran conflict lead to a next Chernobyl or Fukushima? Of course it can. What happened at Fukushima was they lost power, the fuel heated up and melted down, and everybody had to run away, and the rest of it kept melting down because everybody ran away. There's nothing you can do about it. If you hit a missile, then you lose power for... Well, see, the water has to circulate in the fuel pools. Fuel pools, reactor cores, which could be dozens, if they're exposed to oxygen because they're going through a chain reaction, the zirconium will immediately light up in the 1800-degree fires, which will ignite the plutonium and uranium pellets inside of it, and they'll burn in 9,000. And all this heat now will boil off the water. And once the fire starts, by the way, it doesn't need oxygen to burn. So it'll burn underwater just as easy as it'll burn above water. Once it starts burning, you can't switch that off. So once the water drops because you lost power from the missile, I don't know how much fuel they got. I would imagine they got quite a bit, and I've been looking for it. Concern over a possible nuclear disaster at Iran's 4 nuclear facilities. Well, the centrifuges are separating 235, aggregating 235, from spent fuel. So the fuel cycle is about making the fuel to the right, so it's a petrol machine for plutonium and 235. And then you take it out and you put it in the centrifuges and you aggregate the 235s. Sometimes the plutonium, right? Hence the plutonium mixed oxide fuel connotations. If the reactor spent fuel pools, yeah, what do you mean if? You're worried about two things. You're worried about the reactor and you're worried about the spent fuel pools. There's multiple spent fuel pools. There's the reactor. Every reactor has 2 spent fuel pools. So you're twice as likely to have an event. And a reactor will have whatever a reactor can hold, but a fuel pool will have decades of reactor cores stored in it. So it's much more horrifying. And this is what happened to 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools at Japan, with a total of 36 reactor cores melted down. And of course, if you don't show the evidence, they lose their mind. But if you go out and read the media and they say it didn't happen, they don't show you this, then you don't care. That's okay. If Dana don't show it, though, he's hiding something. The fuel pools were at the top of these stumps, reactor 3 and reactor 4 behind me. Officially, that never happened. Nope. Officially, everything is perfect. All the media went there and verified it and said, no, it's gorgeous. Everything's pretty green. They're all identical reactors. And they're all saying that they're on top of that building and everything is perfect. They're saying that building is not damaged. That's the official story all around, no matter who you go to. I made this in 2013. I was like, I got them now. Woo! They're going to take a beating now. And this is 2025. Oh, God. I'm pathetic. I thought I had them. I was wrong. I didn't realize how the lie works. The industry is bulletproof for telling lies. It just tells lies. That's what it does. Every story is a whole bunch of lies. If the infrastructure is hit, it could pose a threat. Whoever wrote this story should be ashamed they were born. But their impact will likely be limited to localized radiation leaks. Like, what are you, localized? If you hit the fuel pool, because that's what they said earlier, they talked about the fuel pool. If they're hit, the impact would be localized radiation leak. They actually used that word. You're like, no, they didn't use that word, Dana. I'm like, no, they absolutely used that word. Here's here's what a leak actually looks like. This is based on 16 days. This is a French government study of radioactive fallout from Japan's leak. It's based on a very small amount. And radiation is the only pollution that will make a plume covering the entire planet. Carbon doesn't go very far. It gets caught up in trees and plants and roots, and that creates more trees and plants and roots. Wherever this land, it kills the trees and plants and roots for 1 million years. Leaks. Yeah, okay. Stuff covers your planet in less than a couple of weeks. It's not a leak, it's a perpetual assault upon humanity and the 8 million species. So far, no strikes have been reported on Iran. We're just getting started, though. I'm pretty sure when Iran finally uses up the majority of Israel's supply, they're going to get desperate and start using some scary stuff. And then once Iran starts rolling out their very high-tech drones, their very high-tech supersonic ballistic missiles, Israel's going to roll out some other technology. They're going to get ugly, I guess, by the looks of things. I got no idea how it's going to play out. It's not looking good for Iran if they don't have a nuclear weapon. Now, allegedly, there's a video circulating this morning. There's a really short video that allegedly came off the Iranian TV and showed a military personnel from the neck down, and he had this little bomb in his hand that was supposed to be a nuclear weapon, and he was stroking it like a cat. Oh, my little nuclear bomb. And the internet erupted all day long about that. And there was quite a few trolls coming out and saying, see, we fucking told you that Iran had nuclear weapons. You should have listened to us. You should have been listening to me. I knew the difference. You wouldn't listen to me. And all these pro-nuclear bloggers were out there going, they were having a field day anyway. So they were setting the stage for justification to nuke Iran after 6 days or something. Iran's not helping by putting a clip like that on their TV channel. Who knows? Iran says that if the Americans come into it, they're going to destroy the economy worldwide by destroying oil and gas, which is one of the biggest sources. So you're going to see inflation just go nuts, like in a 2 or 3 day period. If you see that happening, if you see them tacking ships in the Persian Gulf out there, then start buying gas, buckets of gas, and storing it because the price is going to go nuts. All truck drivers, of course, now are running on little profits. What's going to happen, do you think? The price of everything is going to go crazy. And that on its own will get millions of people on the move. Maybe hundreds of millions of people will be on the move. So far, no strikes have been reported on Iran's nuclear reactor. So you're talking about like $15 loaves of bread, $50 for small pizzas. You're talking about like $400 to $500 to fill your car up. So like taxis and DoorDash, or the common person who's using their vehicle to do errands. You know, Iran was interesting because they pay for gas. It costs you a cent a liter in Iran to fill up your car, or your diesel generators and whatever. A cent a liter. Iran was paying for the gas, basically giving it out for free, a cent a liter. So people were taking vacations, just free vacations, all things considered, right? Fill up your car and and get a pop for $1 and then go drive 600 miles. International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed on Monday the centrifuges machines that spin uranium hexafluoride gas at extremely high speeds to enrich the elements at the facility were damaged. They have like 15,000 of these things or something. This caused radiological chemical contamination. No, it was blown up by a bomb, so that means it was dispersed out of the facility. And they go through a lot of material to get a little tiny bit. Right? They use an obscene amount, rather, just to get a couple of kilograms. You're talking about a huge tonnage. And so if there's any releases, it's going to be insane. And it appears that they destroyed most of those centrifuges. Simply attacking nuclear material with conventional weapons does not trigger an explosion. Well, yeah, it does. If you blow up a fuel pool, as soon as the oxygen hits there, the fuel catches fire. From where I come from, where I'm sitting, that's a major nuclear event. The whole planet is going to get pummeled with radioactive fallout. Fukushima radiation unlikely to raise cancer rates, UN expert says. Huh. And that's my theme tonight for the poll. Is Fukushima radiation likely to raise the cancer rates? And there was a whole bunch of these headlines from yesteryears. Fukushima radiation unlikely to raise cancer rates. Look at that. What do you think of the censorship for last night's show? Holy shit, eh? Like 100 views all day. I had 100 views after 6 hours or something. And then tonight I had like 110. Like 100 at 6 is still brutal censorship. Fukushima radiation unlikely, there's not much I can do about it. Fukushima radiation unlikely to raise cancer rates, UN experts say. This is 2021, March the 10th, the day before the anniversary. There was just hundreds of those headlines showed up. But throughout the years, I got quite a few here. So the tanks were built by 2013. The tanks were all full in 2013 from a giant aquifer under the reactors. And they had no control over the water. The tanks were built to manipulate you, by the way. The tanks weren't filled from under the aquifers. That was a lie too. But it's an interesting part of the story that I think everybody needs to be aware of. So this was 2013. This is the BBC, Rupert Winfield Hayes. And TEPCO will also tell you in 2013 they have no control over the water whatsoever. Nothing. And the 1,000 tanks gets explained away too.
Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water. Beneath the surface, water flows downhill and into the basement of the damaged reactor buildings. There it is contaminated with high levels of radiation. To stop the groundwater flowing on into the nearby ocean, engineers are building an underground barrier. But that is causing the groundwater level to rapidly rise. It's now so high the water will soon reach the surface. Then it will start flowing overground into the sea. This week, the company that owns Fukushima, TEPCO, made this disturbing admission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
So they had no control over the water in 2013. Nothing. That's TEPCO's own words, by the way. And when are you going to use the most water? The first 2 years, right?
Outside experts say it's now clear TEPCO is incapable of handling the cleanup at Fukushima.
Right, and so in that first 2 years, you had outside independents saying TEPCO is the wrong people, because they were administration. They weren't a decommission authority. They had no experience. So why were they left in charge?
It's time for the Japanese government to step in.
And they were the worst ones anyway.
The situation is already beyond what TEPCO can handle, he says. If it were possible to take proper measures, they would have done it already. It's not as if TEPCO is refusing to do what they can. They're doing everything they can, but there are no perfect solutions. Even if the government does step in, it's not clear what it can do.
And they're small tanks, not big tanks, by the way.
The only other solution is to pump out the contaminated groundwater and put it in storage tanks. But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks.
Now, it wasn't, when you count the small one, you still only got 750 in any of the pictures we looked at. And they showed you the small ones, then they showed you these bigger tanks. But that's pretty deceptive to do that.
Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an solution is to pump out the contaminated groundwater and put it in storage tanks. But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up.
So you heard him that time saying most of them are already full to 1,000 tanks.
At least 400 tons of new water pours into the site every day.
400 tons is equal to 3 garden hoses at 30 pounds per square inch over 24 hours. Like a half-inch, 5/8-inch garden hose most people have in their gardens. That's what we're talking about. Is 130, 140 tons a day each. So it doesn't make any sense with these numbers either. This is 2013.
And it's going to continue for years and years. Fukushima's water crisis has only just begun. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
And a few months later, he claimed he was on top of the building you're looking at that doesn't even exist. Yes, by telling lies. That's him up in the right-hand corner. You can see BBC Rupert Wingfield-Hayes. That's him a few months later claiming he's at the top of the building to your left. But a few months before that, he was telling you the water, the tanks are full of the water from underneath the buildings. A UN scientific panel on Tuesday confirmed the previous finding that radiation from 2011 Fukushima disaster in Japan was unlikely to raise cancer rates. Now, what was the date on that story? It's 2021. Is that the same story? Yeah, that's the same story. So 2021, that's right. In 2012, the first year, there was 865,000 extra cancers. And 9 years later, they're saying there was no cancer increases. It wasn't just cancer, by the way. And then they talk about the jump in thyroid cancer in children was due to ultra-sensitive screening methods. Let's just say they're right. Let's pretend they're right. It doesn't explain away 6 out of 10 children have diabetes. It doesn't explain away that 14.2% of newborns need open heart surgery. That's 14,200 children need open heart surgery per 100,000. These are absurd numbers. It doesn't explain that away. And said a jump in thyroid cancer in children was due to ultra-sensitive screening methods. Fukushima was the worst nuclear accident since Chernobyl. Of course, saying that, there's no reason to even invoke the word Chernobyl, because each reactor in Japan core was equal to 100 Chernobyls because it's pure uranium, pure plutonium. I'm starting to get conscious of my talking there. I didn't realize what was going on. I had the headphones on. It was the worst nuclear accident since Chernobyl. Is a terrible thing, the way to frame this, rather. Each reactor is 100 Chernobyls. At the top of the buildings were 8 more reactor cores and 2 of the fuel pools in all 4 buildings. 36 reactor cores is equal to 3,600 Chernobyls. Because Chernobyl was a graphite reactor. It was a brand new reactor. It didn't have spent fuel pools in the buildings or close to it. It was a brand new reactor, and it was graphite. And there's a big difference. With Chernobyl were huge reactor cores. They were pure uranium, pure plutonium. Reactor 3 was a plutonium X oxide reactor. There was at least 55 to 60,000 pounds of plutonium in all the fuel pools combined. And they used to say 2 kilograms is enough to kill everybody on the planet eventually, once you release it into the environment. After Chernobyl, people living close to the plant were exposed to radioactive iodine through contaminated milk. You can't be exposed to just radioactive iodines. It's uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium. The biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rod is going to be curium isotopes. And curium isotopes need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium, for goodness sakes. And so we always see them, and when you look at iodine, well, iodine got an 8-day half-life. And people are like, oh, it's almost gone. It'll be gone in a couple of weeks. And then somebody will say, well, actually, there's 10 half-lives. And they say, oh, well, it'll be gone in 80 days. That was how many years ago? So it don't matter. And put on a football game or something, right? Or because they watch too much of, they grew up watching SpongeBob from the Marshall Islands, and then they graduated to The Simpsons and continued to watch SpongeBob and Simpsons. And then their heroes were Spider-Man and the Hulk, which are all created by, or used by the nuclear industry to indoctrinate the vulnerable children of your societies. With the happy participation of Hollywood and the media, by the way. The Japanese authorities took more effective actions, really, including evacuations that significantly reduced exposure. How could you reduce the exposure when you covered the entire planet? Inhaling just one hot particle can cause a cancer, a Columbia medical professor. And Fukushima was burning radioactive waste, so you can't destroy it by burning it at 3,000 grade Fahrenheit temperatures. You're just liberating the isotopes back into the environment. 1 billion pounds. They were bringing it, grinding it up and shipping it right across the country to incinerators, and they were burning it in the communities. It's the strangest, it's suicidal, right? It's kamikaze stuff. The Japanese authorities took more effective actions, including evacuation that significantly reduced exposure. Clearly it didn't. And by the way, this stuff is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Like explosions going off in your cells and blowing holes in your DNA every second for the rest of your life. Your body tries to repair it and attack the source every day for the rest of your life. So the Japanese didn't take effective action, and they still haven't stopped growing the food there. It was 55 countries were forced to ban the food for over a decade in half the country in 14 prefectures. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 atoms a kilogram of cesium-137. So 50 atoms a kilogram of cesium-137. In 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. So how the frig are you supposed to identify 50 in a kilogram? You can't see it anyway because it's an atom. All atoms are the same size, right? But it's a pulse. It pulses energy. Each of them pulses energy every second, almost at the speed of light. Irreversible heart damage. This was because of Chernobyl studies. Children with 11 becquerels a kilogram of cesium start to see heart problems. It's impossible to find food on the planet at 11 becquerels a kilogram, less than 11 becquerels a kilogram. It's impossible. So that the study one of the studies they were talking about was this study here. 35.8% of the Fukushima children have thyroid tumors. These are tumors. These are 2 to 3 centimeter tumors. And the thyroid of an adult is 3 by 5 centimeters, and of a kid is about 2 by 3. So you're talking about kid's thyroid with a tumor the same size as their thyroid. And the thyroid produces the hormones which regulates every function of their development and their bodies. And so before Fukushima, 1 in every 3 kids didn't have a tumor in their thyroid, okay? It's absurd to suggest that, because that's what they're saying. Nearly 1 in every 3 kids tested. The government decided that they didn't matter. And so pre-Fukushima was 1 in a million. Post-Fukushima, after Fukushima, it was 13,646 out of 38,200. But there was all kinds of other, it wasn't just thyroid, because it's not just cancer, but this is actual tumors, which means you're producing radioactive hormones for the rest of your life. And if you got that kind of a dose in your body, then it also means your skeleton is full. And so you're producing radioactive stem cells for their development and for the rest of their lives. And bone tumors, of course, are the most brutal way to get sick. The Japanese authorities took more effective actions, including evacuations, that significantly reduced exposure. Simply wasn't true. As I showed you earlier, 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. These are absurd numbers. 2 days before the 10th anniversary of Fukushima, United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation, I Hate Your Guts Unclear, / I Hate Your Guts, Humans, which comprises 52 scientists from 27 countries, 52 scumbags from 27 countries, published and updated 2014. There's these people are the cruelest people imaginable. To get this job, their job, to get street creds, is to deny any adverse effects whatsoever. That's how they're getting their street creds, to be more eviler as they get older in their career. Based on data from 2019, radiation dose estimated to the members of the public have either decreased or are comparable with the scientific committee's previous estimates, said in a statement. Well, first off, that's United Nations. They have IRPA, the IPRC, the International Atomic Energy Agency, not just UNSCLEAR. And they all back each other up as if they're independent when they're all the same organization. It's like me having 500 subsidy companies. And then each one of my companies are an authority or a watchdog on something you do. You're a tourist, we have a watchdog authority on tourists. If you're nuclear, you have an authority on nuclear. And then that's weaponized against you by the League of Nations, also known as United Nations. That they had changed their name from League of Nations to United Nations after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The committee therefore continued to consider future health effects directly related to the radiation exposure unlikely to be discernible. So this was the norm. That every story that covered it was going to tell you the same law, those same paragraphs, same pictures. But it showed up almost 100 times, and we covered it on that anniversary. We covered that lie. I ran into it again today, and so I start going down that rabbit hole, and here we are. Everything was going good. I was going to have a normal news cycle, and then I start getting a little ticked, a little upset. Extreme increase in mortality caused by cardiac diseases. That's right. Death rates might give the creeps to some people. No. Everybody was evacuated. Everything was hunky-dory, Dana. United Nations says nothing happened, so therefore, nothing happened. Oh, that's nice to know. Now we find out the tanks were all full in 2013.
I'm standing is.
That's Rupert Winfield Hayes, a couple of months after he told you the tanks were all full. Now he's pretending he's on top of a building that doesn't even exist. Backed up and sanctioned by United Nations. So why would you ever believe anything they told you? Why would you ever conceivably believe a single thing they told you after lying to you about that? Why would they lie about that and the other reactors? What else have they lied about over the last number of decades? Everything? Most likely. They have a big interest in censoring me, apparently. they've actually censored themselves out of my anniversary video. They knocked out 4 minutes of my anniversary video, and we looked, because I record these shows, we done a comparison to the YouTube video 12 hours later when the censorship shows up, and your comments will show up. And we found the 2 clips they cut out, and these were United Nations clips. The committee therefore continued to consider the future health effects directly. You'll find it in my video section, because you're in the live section if you're watching this. The committee therefore continues to consider that the future health effects directly related to radiation exposure are unlikely to be discernible, so they're not going to look at it no more. A study using equivalent equipment in 3 prefectures not exposed to radiation. So they say where they done the studies, there's the same amount of tumors as there was in Fukushima. So therefore, there was no difference. Wrap your mind around that statement. Because they say that those prefectures weren't exposed to radiation. They lie so much that they must lie. Can you imagine the lies they tell to their friends and families? Because at work they have to lie. Everything's a lie. Never, ever tell the truth. Never acknowledge anything, and always do a counter, right? So they go to university to get the education, incredible education, so they can get that job. Because that's a very well-paying job. Just give me a moment here. What have I got done to myself? No, I'm on the right page. Excuse me. Not exposed to radiation. There we go. It's important not to let them, that somebody challenged their narrative, right? Somebody came out and said, well, wait a second. First off, this is a Neptunium-239 covering the whole planet in 20 days. The food was banned in 14 prefectures by 55 countries for a decade. So which prefectures were they saying didn't get exposed to radiation? And why would 55 countries ban those prefectures? They said that didn't have any radiation. And then look what they left people in. This is a United Nations study too. Fukushima City had 229 counts per minute of cesium-137 per square meter of topsoil. And they got 300,000 people there. So, like, all these communities were abandoned by United Nations. United Nations turned their back and done a study and said there was no adverse side effects to the people living. And that number there is the population, and the first number is the community. But this number, the third row, is physical atoms per square meter. Now, like 167, 185, not 167, if you add another couple numbers, 185, was an evacuation zone at a nuclear plant site on your Geiger counter. And so they left all these communities in these nuclear wastelands because they meet the definitions pre-Fukushima of a nuclear wasteland. It's just so dishonest in so many ways. Why would you ever want to trust him again? How could you ever trust him again? How could you conceivably not be... So here's a plutonium study based on 20 days. But no, everybody... there was no radiation, and not exposed to radiation in the 3 prefectures where they calibrated their... We'll get back to this story. 1,500 atoms of sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs per cubic meter in California air. So how bad would it have been in the local areas? You had 1 million atoms per square meter on the ground in North America of cesium or xenon-133. You had 20 million particles per liter. So you could have had hundreds of 100 billion per square meter of iodine-131 particles on top of that, which are insane. And then another study from Ottawa, Canada, 220 million atoms of iodine-129 per liter. Per liter, elevated, continued for months. Well, it's got a 15 million year half-life. It kept coming for months. So the bioaccumulation even if it stopped after a couple of months, which is how does that work? How can you stop when it doesn't go away for 150 million years because there's 10 half-lives? Right, so it's very frustrating when you're reading their lies. There's 500 trillion atoms per kilogram. So a BQ is the Becquerel. The Becquerel is the pulse of energy from the atom every second. So you can register that because you get this pulse of energy, and it hits my Geiger counter, 141 counts per minute, 150. A study using equivalent equipment in 3 prefectures not exposed to radiation from Fukushima, but the whole country was buried in radioactive fallout. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags just on 3% of the land in Fukushima. Every tree, when the wind blows, is shaking out radiation and different isotopes and radioactive branches and leaves, and found rates of thyroid cysts and old possible indication of cancer as high as those in Fukushima. So apparently everybody got cancer. Every kid got cancer in Japan. But it's not caused by Fukushima. But every kid literally got cancer in their thyroid. Every kid in Japan is producing radioactive stem hormones in the children. So therefore, it's no different than Fukushima. The reason it's different. It's the same as Fukushima. The same amount of kids, which is 356,000 out of a million, when it used to be 1 in a million. Pre-Fukushima, by the way, we have those studies. As high as those in Fukushima. So you got the same amount of cancers in the other prefectures as you got in Fukushima. Therefore, it couldn't have been caused by Fukushima. Well, what caused? How did you go from 1 in a million children to 356,000 out of a million? What was the catalyst if it wasn't Fukushima? So, like, United Nations, and these are kids we're talking about, are throwing these kids, saying, the hell with you. And if you want us to help you, you can come to the hospital, we'll radiate you and finish you off the first chance we get. And taxpayers will pay us to do it. In Canada, they'll steal your kid so they can kill him with radiation. You tell me that industry is not out of control. Well, I can assure you it's out of control. We got cases. We've covered stories, and I have them there, where they take the child, because the child has cancer, they got to get radiation therapy. They have to do it. And the child's like, I don't want to, all my friends died from the radiation, I don't want to do it. So they took the child, put it in the hospital under armed guards, and they radiated the child. When the child was finally dying from the radiation, all of her hair that fell out, they sent her home to die with her mother, who'd done everything she can to try to protect her. And she was just, the police and everybody, the child custody showed up, and they took possession of her kid because her kid had cancer and she didn't want to use radiation. Well, you got to use radiation. The government says so. You tell me that industry is not out of control and soulless. It clearly doesn't have a soul because it's doing this on a scale that is just terrifying. By the way, nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. Well, no, it couldn't have caused nothing. It couldn't have caused anything. 35.8% of the children have thyroid tumors. These are tumors. Tumors of 2 centimeters or less. Tumors that are producing radioactive hormones. Nearly 1 in every 3 kids tested. And the government, the insane nuclear industry, had the government disappear. I mean, this is evil that has to be dealt with. You can't just pretend it's not happening. That's not a solution. The first thing I would do if I had a big foundation support me is, besides a stupid amount of field researchers, study the species, because that's what's going to manifest first, is I would litigate the use of it in hospitals and on humans, let alone animals. I would litigate it and win. A study using equivalent equipment in 3 prefectures not exposed to radiation from Fukushima found rates of thyroid tumors, possible indication of cancer. Well, it is cancer, not an indication. It was actual tumors. They call it a tumor. Tumors are 2 centimeters less, but the thyroid is only 2 centimeters. And it's a gland. It's producing the hormones for the regulation of your body all day and all night. That's the worst spot you can have a tumor, especially when you're talking about kids because they're developing. Dirtbags to do that, eh? Large increase in the number of thyroid cancers detected among the children is not the result of radiation exposure. Well, what is it the result of? The large increase in the number of thyroid cancers, so they're admitting that there was an increase. They're acknowledging that. Yeah, but it's not Fukushima, huh? Well, what is it? I don't care. It's not Fukushima. That's all that we're saying. Have a nice day. We're unclear. Durka durka. The large increase, so they acknowledge it. The large increase is not normal. So every prefecture they looked at had the same massive large increase in number of thyroid cancers. They're calling it cancer there, right? At the very end of it. You tell me that's not scumbaggery. Detected among the exposed children, which is 13,646 out of 38,200 children, which is 356,000 out of a million, not the result of radiation exposure. Well, what else could it be? And why wouldn't it be? And that only works if you refuse to acknowledge that Fukushima melted down. You refuse to acknowledge you already had, in the first year, 865,000 extra cancers. They stopped releasing the statistics after that went viral. Did they really think it wasn't going to go viral? Sadistic demons, though, is probably the best way to describe these people, isn't it? Rather, they are the results of ultra-sensitive screening procedures that reveal the prevalence of abnormalities. These are tumors. These are 2 centimeters, the size of their thyroid. If it was their children's thyroid, they would be doing everything they could to get rid of it. In the population not previously detected. So you're saying everybody got tumors. Quite the coincidence in a country that had 36 reactor cores melt down in 8 fuel pools at the top of 4 reactor buildings, I suppose. Just another coincidence. Every nuclear plant is surrounded by farms. All the kids have tumors that live in a nuclear wasteland. Who would have thought it? Officials sharply raised the radiation levels for the victims to get iodine pills after the meltdown, 75 times higher than the crazies recommended already for children. They raised the levels, not double, not triple, but 75 times higher. Wall Street Journal. You tell me this industry is not insane. Then you haven't seen nothing yet, baby. So why would you raise it 75 times higher than what was already recommended? Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Yes, I'm asking whoever done it. Now, no, they're not watching, but I'm asking. Because then I got plausible deniability. No one can ever say I never asked. Radiology expert finds up to 45 microsieverts near a school zone, 90 times higher than Chernobyl's evacuation threat hole. Every school they looked at had the same thing. Nose rise in cancer rates after Fukushima, says UN. That's the Globe BBC. Not just, what year was that? That was 2013. The year before that, they came out and acknowledged 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed. Nose rises in cancer rates after Fukushima, 2013. But actually, there really was. Fukushima meltdown unlikely to cause many cancers, UN scientist says. Medical expert. Japan's safety standards and radiation levels for children are unconscionable. Expert says the risk of cancer from Fukushima is tiny. Nursery schools, Geiger counters nearly off to scale near play equipment. Topsoil had already been replaced. 24,000 atoms in a kilogram of cesium in the kindergarten near the west coast of Japan, 200 kilometers from the meltdowns. These are catastrophic numbers. And it can't just be cesium. Novel study puts Fukushima doses into perspective. This is the World Nuclear News. This is a lobbying group for the nuclear industry. Wicked, eh? Evil, man. It comes so natural for him, I suppose. A newly published study on the radiation doses received by Fukushima has concluded most people in the prefecture unlikely to receive the significantly different to normal background levels. So you had a lobbying group coming out vehemently denying that there was any adverse side effects at the biggest nuclear event in human history. Pretty striking, you ask me. Just let me get myself... Because sometimes if I double click, this will happen like you see there where I go down to the bottom of the page. And yeah, let me do this. Just bear with me. Now what did I do? Try it again. Sorry. Sometimes I'm spot on, sometimes I'm not. There we go. Let me get back. There we go. We're all good again. Hard to imagine something more frightening than 5-year-olds marching out. There was 80,000 children and pregnant women were given dosimeters to wear around their necks. And you can't read them, right? You got to send them away to a university, they'll read them. Nuclear students don't like you at all. Imagine going to university and you got to study lab rats, human rats against their will. Parts of a school playground declared off limits 200 kilometers southeast of Fukushima. Children and the staff got to wear hats and gargle regularly. So this is quackery science, right? At least give them a paper suit every day. Parts of the school playground declared off limit after 0.25 of a microsievert. That's a quarter of a microsievert. The government's answer to protecting children in Fukushima from radioactive fallout is wear long sleeve shirts while at school and shut up. Really, they're so heartless in what they were and how they treated everybody. Fukushima-related child cancer unlikely to rise, says the International Atomic Energy Agency. Prime Minister, former advisor, government worsened radiation exposure. Says thyroid cancer expected in children in Fukushima nearby prefectures. And instead what they said, well, they had the same amount of cancers in this prefecture as Fukushima, so it couldn't have been caused by Fukushima because radiation couldn't travel that far. This is quackery and very dangerous. Unacceptable quackery. These are monsters. I'm not sure there's any other way to describe them, is there? This is the definition of monsters. And it was. January 2013, the UN said that there is only a low risk to Japan's population due to radioactivities released from the Fukushima accident. For the general population in wider Fukushima prefecture, across Japan and beyond, the predicted rates are low. No observable increase in cancer rates above baseline rates are anticipated, WHO said. And despite the fact that in the first year, there was 865,000 extra cancers. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed. And it's not just cancer. There's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. And you're seeing that skyrocket, right? Fukushima linked cancer surge unlikely, says UN. 2014, like I say, in 2012, 865,000 extra cancers. But they stopped releasing the numbers. So they got plausible deniability. They didn't have access to those numbers, right? But they know. Researchers who were telling you that, by the way, were too frightened to get closer than 100 kilometers from the meltdown. So I was quite shocked by the numbers. School playground staircase had radiation 70 times the maximum allowed, equal to 69 millisieverts, 69,000 microsieverts. That's 280,000 millisieverts, or microsieverts above what playground parts were abandoned at 0.25 or something like that, is it? 69,000 microsieverts. The playground staircase. These are insane numbers. How many times had it already rained? After cleanup, high school catastrophic numbers. Daycare center catastrophic numbers. Yeah, I can't see any adverse side effects from these kinds of exposures. Data. 75. Can you imagine this is your job? They got all of this information, much, much more there, and they're going, well, just write down there is no adverse side effects. And go pick up your paycheck out the door there. And go home and take a couple of weeks off and go on a worldwide vacation. And when you come back, the contractors will probably be finished your swimming pool and your new garage for your new cars. Just put your name on the paper, say there is no adverse side effects. And they went to university to get a job, to get that job, so they would have those perks. So in a stroke of a pen, they destroy and kill millions of people in increments over time. That's the real serial killers, right? 75% of Fukushima, 300,000 children are going to school. So contaminated, it would be radiation control areas in nuclear plants. But the nuclear CBC, which is the government of Canada, Fukushima cancer risks are not as serious as thoughts. UN says, oh, that's so wonderful. God bless you, and you love the poor kids really well. The Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation cast a broad, which is unclear, IRPA, IPRC, the International Atomic Energy Agency, they're the same people on each board. It's the same people in each committee. The dose to the general public, but those incurred during the first year and estimated for their lifetime, are generally low or even very low. That's reassuring. So why did 16,000 workers quit? Worst case scenario was abandoned Tokyo because it's like a banana, Dana. Oh, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. It's like a banana. You got to run away. Once a banana, always a banana. La 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 la. Pop, pop. Pop, pop, pop. Excuse me. Worst case scenario was abandoned in Tokyo forever. Impossible to remove the hundreds of radioactive materials and the 1,200 radionuclides. It's not just cesium, there's 1,200 radionuclides you got to worry about. Don't worry, the doctor says radiation is not the biggest impact on the Fukushima health. Over 1 million Japanese still live in an area with high daily radioactive exposures. The previous cesium, gamma, not counting alphas, neutrons, and betas, not counting 1,200 isotopes, limits in rice was just 0.1 atom per kilogram. Now it's 1,000 times higher. If you're only looking for cesium, then that means they're murdering you. Guess what? They're murdering you. 100 atoms a kilogram of cesium is nuclear waste before Fukushima. Still is, but now they're saying it's safe. Them being the idiots that the industry managed to sign our lives away with. After 100 is safe to eat, but it's not. It can never be. No health risk from Fukushima, says the crazies. You know, the nuclear waste being processed was 17 atoms a kilogram when it exploded post-Fukushima. Because France... So, in other words, France didn't have food at 100 atoms per kilogram. They were storing it. Foreign minister, stop claiming the food is safe. I would explain why there's almost 1 million extra cancers in the first year. Fukushima radiation unlikely to raise cancer ratio, an expert says. So there. Fukushima was the worst nuclear accident since Chernobyl. What a cop-out, eh, to say something like that. And you'll see that connotation. If you search that connotation, Fukushima was the worst nuclear accident since Chernobyl, you're going to get the whole phone book thrown at you of the apologists. It's really special how evil these people are. There's nothing like it. And like if you confront them, they'll shit in their pants. They'll dig it out and wipe it all over their body, so you'll be too disgusted to hit them. Because all you got to do with these scientists, if you go up and threaten to punch them in the stomach, like they'll beg you, please, I'll do anything, don't punch me in the stomach. Please, I suck your... Don't punch me in the stomach. That's all you gotta do. Like if you're gonna, they got their Lamborghini sports car there, and you walk up, say, "Give me the keys," and they're like, "No," and you say, "I'm gonna punch you in the stomach." You're like, "Oh, don't punch me in the stomach." They'll give you the keys, their watch, their rings, their wallet. They're real life cowards, eh? We've seen a number of them over the years. They look like they'll fall over if somebody opens the door and the wind blows through. And their shoes, if you look at their shoes where they're tied up, you'll see crazy glue so it stays tied up because they don't know how to tie their own shoes. Former advisor said Japan's too scared to tell the people the truth about Fukushima. No, the International Atomic Energy Agency won't let anybody tell the truth. You can't have a nuclear industry. You can't have an International Atomic Energy Agency or UNSCLEAR or ERPA, the IPRCs, without nuclear. And so they'll kill you. By the way, the third biggest donor to the International Atomic Energy Agency is Japan. This is sickening. Baby food maker ignored information on the cesium contamination. How can you just have cesium contamination? What planet do they live in where they only have cesium fallout? What dimension are they in? They can't be in the same dimension as me and you. La 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 la. We're not going to get through it. Get too much. It concluded further investigation wasn't necessary because only children ate that baby food, right? So when the baby food maker is poisoning the babies, you're in a different spectrum of reality. You need to fix this shit. Cancer rate's not expected to rise after Fukushima, says the apologist. Of course, food maker Meiji Co. received information on 3 occasions about radioactive cesium in his baby food. It paid no heed to the leads for about 2 weeks. So it poisoned tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of children. And 30.8 becquerels of cesium. They're only looking for cesium. You got to worry more about the plutonium. That's evil on a level that I can't even wrap. Come on, man. You're a food company. Don't do that. Don't be that fucking guy. 300 times over cesium limits in wild mushrooms. 140 kilometers from Tochigi. Like, don't eat mushrooms, for Christ's sakes. Don't eat much mushrooms. My goodness. Fungi seems to really accumulate radiation for some reason, right? Mushrooms is a popular food. And so a quick way to get leukemia is start eating mushrooms regularly. I won't touch them. I just won't touch them. Why take the chance? Why would you want to make everybody sick and yourself sick for? Why take that chance? Because they aggregate the radiation. So what? Like 31,000 atoms a kilogram. Man. Holy shit, eh? And there is no national safety standard. 100 atoms a kilogram is not a standard. That's a murder and genocide on its own. Each one of them eventually turns into a tumor. Fukushima radiation unlikely to raise cancer rates, says UN experts. So who is a UN expert? Is that somebody that we should trust or someone that we should be terrified of? And all of these medias didn't even bother fact-checking it. 2 days before the 10th anniversary of the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation, 52 scientists from 27 countries. So it's the same story in every one of them. Unexpected finding revealed in Tochigi Prefecture 17 times the radiation limits in front of a school. Well, it's a good thing there's only a couple of students on that part of the country. It's a good thing that that school is not full of students, healthy students trying to have a good day and have to deal with this stuff every day. Oh, that's right, that's what is going on. 5 million atoms a kilogram, no decontamination. You can't eat the food there, but they're forced to live here. That's a cult. When the nuclear industry has this much influence and power of the stuff I showed you tonight, this is not a game. You're being exterminated. This is not a game. These are evil, vicious criminals of the worst magnitude. Kyoto News uses the term hot zone to describe Miyagi, Iwate, Tachika Prefecture, which is probably where most of the rice you're getting on your tables right now is coming from. Don't worry though, because UN experts find no harmful effects from Fukushima. Have a nice day. Chinga chingy. FDA import alert. U.S. bans agricultural fishery products from 14 prefectures. Really? Because it's not like a banana and a potato chip? Yeah, we're not going to say that out loud, but yeah. Concern over contamination spreading to most countries around the Pacific. 2 years too late, right? Unprecedented situation of radioactive pollution from Fukushima. Intensive contamination areas designated near downtown Tokyo. Yeah, there was areas, like, they didn't let kids, a lot of parents wouldn't let their kids go out for the first 2 years just to school because they had no choice, and then they had to stay indoors. The only time they went out was to go to school, and they weren't allowed to play outdoors during school. And officials say there are health assistance for kids and pregnant women is needed. So you had hot zones downtown Tokyo, and instead of cleaning it up, because it's really hard to clean this stuff up. It's impossible in the city. So all you do is just block off the area and say, well, you just can't go over there. And how come I can't go over there? Well, it doesn't matter. You just can't go over there. Like, that's where you're supposed to abandon Tokyo. 36 million people, metropolitan Tokyo. You're supposed to abandon that, not do what they done. Just give me a second. And try to cut some of the dust. Pregnant women get a free new house if they move back to Fukushima. Oh yeah, baby, guess where we're going? We're going living in a nuclear wasteland. Oh yeah. The world has never come across a situation like this one. That's underestimating the reality of it, isn't it? Fukushima radiation unlikely to raise cancer rates. So I can show you all the yin and yang of this story, and I do 5 days a week because I'm a fucking sucker for punishment. And somebody has to be out here sticking the elbows in the faces of this industry. Fukushima radiation unlikely to raise cancer rates, says UN experts 2021. Really, but they show you that picture. This is a picture from that story. I was like, that's a pretty darn good picture. I don't get good pictures too often. I gotta put that in my pile. I gotta put that in my oh shit pile. Just hang on a second. Because every oh shit deserves a pile, right? Ah, it looks pretty good to me. Slap some paint on it, maybe. Outside of that, what's the big whoop? Hang on a second. Well, that's Medusa. That's reactor 3. And look at all the... So you see these beams. It's hard to appreciate how big they actually are because that's actually a 19-story building. It's 150 feet wide. But those beams, you can actually turn an SUV around on those beams. You can drive on that like a highway if it wasn't torn apart, right? And it's so wide, each of those beams are, you can actually turn an SUV around on it. It's really hard to comprehend looking at these buildings. That's one of the interesting things I noticed about this story. And so when you look at a building, this was a frame put around number 1 I'm going to show you in a second. You can see a man stood up there. You get, now this is 1/4 or 1/5 of the building. And that section there, that those cross beams, so this was a frame they were putting around reactor 1, and it had a Kevlar panels. And the panels would get hung on it, and everything is done through gravity. So they build it off-site, and then they bring it to reactor 1 and reassemble it with cranes, remote control cranes. Because, you know, it's not like a banana. And so that section there is taller than the stump of reactor 3 and reactor 4 if they were stacked on top of each other. Just the bottom section for the cover is taller than reactor 3 and 4. But don't let that destroy a good lie. Was unlikely to raise cancer. Now, it's not just cancer. There's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. There's skeletal tumors. 70%, you know, like all the animals, all the mammals, and all the humans are producing radioactive hormones and radioactive stem cells. For sure. There's no way we could escape unless you were in a pretty air-sealed place for the last 14 years. Which could be true. If that's the case, welcome back to the world. It's fucked up as much as it's ever going to be now. 70% of the children tested are contaminated with radioactive cesium. 70%. 70% of the children. %70 of the children. But don't worry, because no radiation deaths, but their souls are killed. Sick frigger. Pregnant women used for decontamination activities after Fukushima. Horrific health toll from Fukushima. Impossible not to be moved by the scale of death and suffering. Thousands of die of cancers. That's just the tip of the iceberg. The number of dead babies significantly increased in many areas of Japan. The government's actions are unconscionable. That's being polite using those words, by the way. Fukushima radiation unlikely to raise cancer rates, says UN experts. Well, that's a relief. Cancer rates spiked after Fukushima, but don't blame radiation. And paper suits can't protect you. Typico used to say they had 7,000 people a day working at Fukushima, so we started making fun of them. Like, well, where's the 7,000 paper suits every day? Because you can't reuse them. So what are you doing with 7? There's a lot of paper suits. They're highly radioactive because they're out in a nuclear wasteland. It's not like you can put them somewhere and hang out there too, because there's going to be incredible radioactive particles falling off them. And he came out with a story saying they burned 7,000 paper suits each day in the incinerators on the site. So they needed plausible deniability, see? So they actually come out and addressed it. And bless their hearts. The reality of it was there was nothing 7,000 people can do on a site where you ejected reactor cores and fuel pools of reactor cores all over the site. It doesn't matter how brave or stoic you are, your organs melt. Fukushima caused an uptick in thyroid, except maybe it didn't. Well, there was 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. How did that happen? How did that happen? If not, cancer epidemic underway in Fukushima. Rates are up 6,000%. It's definitely a holocaust. And everything's being swept under the rug. It's very frightening. This is a doctor. My family members are brainwashed. Cancer rates, this is Wired. They're pretty low what they done. Cancer rates spiked after Fukushima, but don't blame the radiation. Come on, Wired, you're supposed to be the good guy. When I first heard that a tsunami had damaged Japan's Fukushima nuclear reactor 5 years ago, and you kind of expect this from Wired, by the way, which was now melting down, flooding the ocean with God knows how much radioactive material. We didn't know at first. I did something that I'm embarrassed about now. I ordered a bottle of potassium iodine. What a freaking lowlife, eh? What a scumbag to say something like that. What are you going to do? It's a journalist. What do you expect? If a journalist can't be cruel and inhumane and sadistic and treacherous and evil, who can? That's their job, right? You're just jealous because you're not a journalist. It's a grueling process. I don't know how the hell I do this 5 days a week. It's a grueling, because you got to gather up everything every day. That's hours and hours and hours of misery. And then you got to keep your brain straight long enough to tell the story. That's like 2 hours. You got to grab the local daily news cycle to make it relevant. All in the hopes that you're going to have a better world. That's what it's all about. You're trying to make the world better. And you do it through an educational program. And the industry done it. If the industry didn't fuck with me so much, I wouldn't be like this. The industry created it. You can probably see the light reflecting. Well, my screen doesn't normally do that. Stop frigging with me. Did you guys get a flashy screen on your side that time? Mine flashed for about 20 seconds. That was wild. Oh, that's wild. What a world I live in. Hang on. So I guess they were waiting for me to react to make sure they had me, and so now they got me. YouTube is not receiving my single. Is there any single showing up? That's not cool. Is it okay on your end? Anybody out there? Is anybody out there? Oh, we're gone 2 hours in the show already. Wow. Maybe we'll give it up, I suppose. Colette says it's fine. Thank you, Colette. Dana Nasana says it's okay. Well, there you go. Well, I got to do something different tomorrow with this whole system is what I'm going to do. All right, let's come back to the poll for a second. I know James got a song out. I'm pretty excited about that myself. Is Fukushima radiation likely to raise cancer rates? That's a perfect poll for tonight, isn't it? Because you got all the apologists saying there will be no increase in cancer rates. The bulk of Fukushima radiation did not pose a cancer risk. CBC, which is the Canadian government media, the official mouthpiece of the Canadian government. I find our James Lucy put out a new song. It's the same artist, musician, filmmaker of the first song we played tonight. And I put a link to his site. I'm going to copy and paste the song because I mess with the volume where his volume is going to be perfect, but because I got headphones on, I'm live streaming it from his site. I'm going to put a link in the comment section there for you, and that'll be James' song. Now, you won't get the comments. If you close the comments, You can't come back and get them for 12 hours, and then you'll get the comments again. So I just put that in the comment section with the yellow screen of death. And that'll take you over to that song that we're listening to. And I'll come back and close that after. I'm getting there. And so we're going to play this song. This is a brand new song that James just published a few hours ago. And he does all the music. There's a really good song there, From Core to Collapse. All of his last 50, 60, 70 songs, it's almost 100% perfect rate. Well, I shouldn't say that's 100%. Even genres that I'm not really fussy about, it's still fantastic. I love it. I mean, how can you beat that? It's insane. He's got over 330 anti-nuclear songs. More than the entire planet combined. All right, let's play that. I'll get out of the way. We'll see everybody. Tomorrow is Thursday, so tomorrow is the last day of the week. We got to get a show in tomorrow night, so we got another week with 5 shows. It's very important that I always try, but I don't always succeed. Is getting 5 shows a week. We've been doing good for a while now. Let's keep it rolling. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. See you in the next one. We'll see you on the next.
Love joins, nuclear splits. Love bonds, nuclear induces Wigner effect. In love, heat is shared. Nuclear must evacuate it. Affection flows. Fission interrupt. Love thrive in exposure. Nuclear survives through shielding. Love invites entropy and transforms it. Nuclear and decays anyway. Containment is not connection. Redundancy is not trust. Connection is flagged as critical. Affection is rises the impulse to hold. No attachment, no feedback. Nuclear is anti-love.
That was awesome. Okay, have a great night. Hugs for everybody. And see you in the next one.